We are joined on this episode by a writer and director whose short films and online series have screened at festivals all around the world. Someone who cut her teeth working as a script editor slash coordinator for shows including The Tourist, Stateless, and season 2 of Wolf Creek. And her debut feature screenplay, the sci-fi thriller Monolith, is available now on VOD here in the States. She is Lucy Campbell. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us on the program here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for joining us. How we always start these things is just by asking you to go way back in time and see what gave you the bug for filmmaking, for telling stories. Did you have a person in your life, an experience, or maybe a particular movie that got you hooked?
I think, I grew up as a kind of only child with a single mother. So I kind of always had quite an imagination because I just kind of didn't really have any other, siblings around or anyone else to kind of hang out with and talk to. So I think stories became something that I kind of fell in love with quite quickly and quite easily as a kid, even just telling stories before I really, knew how to, I guess, put it together writing wise. My mum kind of worked in the film industry before I was born, and she was still doing a bit of stuff in a kind of small independent way when I was young. And so my household, like growing up in my household, there was always like a film shoot going on, or like, just people talking about movies and talking about TV series and stuff like that. So I kind of grew up in that world. And so it felt quite natural, I guess, to ultimately have that in the back of my mind. But, in high school, I had this idea that I wanted to be a journalist, just because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I kind of liked writing. That was something I was always good at English, always liked writing. And then I got into music, ended up being in bands, and really what sort of sent me into film school and kind of started me on like a more sort of formal trajectory that I'm on now was in my band, the bassist, Tasman, decided that he wanted to audition for film school. And I was like, you can't audition for film school and not, and I'm not going, like, I've got to go for that now. So, because I'm quite a competitive person. And so I auditioned for film school and got into this film school called MAPS Film School. And it was a little kind of cowboy place here in Adelaide in Australia, and did 2 years there and found that I really loved writing and directing. And that's what really switched me on. But I think, writing has always been part of my life, whether it was kind of like writing in a more formal sort of journalistic sense. I did music, right? I wrote for music magazines. I wrote a novel when I was like a teenager for fun. I sort of, it's always been there. And then kind of going to film school, I was like, oh, this is the way I want to write. This is how I love writing, and, finding the screenplays, finding scripts and screenplays, and writing and directing and collaborating and all of that. That's it. Just immediately kind of just switched me on, and I was suddenly like, oh my God, I can do those things. I can make the movies that, I loved and grew up with when I was a kid. And there's some of the stuff that I loved when I was a kid that, when I was a child, I was absolutely obsessed with Kindergarten Cop. I don't know if you guys
love Kindergarten Cop.
Oh, yeah. You're talking on the right podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, I don't know. I was too young for it. Like, I think my nan had a tape of it. She taped it off of the TV or whatever. And so you know how when back in the days, back in the 90s, if you were taping something off the TV, you quite often missed like the beginning or the ending of it because the tape ran out or whatever. So I sort of never really had the first 5 minutes of that film. I just kind of came in a little late on it because Nan hadn't been quick enough with the record button. But yeah, that was like a film where I was just like really, really obsessed with it. I'd watch it, rewind it, watch it again. It was the same with Mary Poppins. That was another really big obsession. And then as I got a little bit older, I started finding, I guess, making a bit more of a decision about the type of movies I really loved. And Fargo, the Coen brothers Fargo, was probably the really big one when I was about like 13 or 14 that I was homesick from school and I watched, and I just went, that's the movie that I absolutely love and adore, and was just watching, I'd watch once a year without fail kind of thing. So yeah, that kind of sent me into that kind of independent sort of dark comedy, thriller, mystery kind of world. And from then on, I just kind of kept on, sponging as much as I could off of just watching movies and sneaking into movies for free at my local cinema where I could. I was a bit naughty, really, but I used to just kind of walk in. Me and my friend would go in when we had a spare couple of hours and go to a movie for free. And I just sort of thought of it as an educational experience. But apparently everyone I spoke years later, I met the person that works behind the counter at the local cinema, and they were like, "Oh, I know you because you and your friend used to just always walk into the movies for free. Like, we knew what you were doing. We thought we were being so sneaky, but they were like, no, we knew what you were doing and we didn't care about it." So yeah, that was kind of, I had a slightly informal education early on and then went to film school and made it formal.
Got it. It's interesting hearing your background into like a lot of different creative fields as well, with writing and music and journalism even, which definitely has a lot of crossover with creative writing as well. I think it's interesting, film is a medium that does pull in all of those different art forms. So it makes sense that you kind of gravitated towards them and then landed in film, as you said, when it kind of coalesced for you in film school.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think film for me was like, oh, it's got everything. It's got music. It's got sort of the creative, like art. I really loved production design when I first started. I thought maybe production design was kind of or art department was like a department that I was really interested in. It's kind of, and post, editing and all of that. It's sort of got so many different art forms, so many different artists working on this one, kind of collaborative medium that I really kind of loved. Whereas, and I loved music, and being in bands was amazing, and working, and we toured around the place. We went overseas, we played festivals. And I think it had what I was really searching for was that gang atmosphere, which I really gravitate towards in everything that I try and pursue is kind of about a collaboration and kind of creating these little gangs of people that, I can work with and really rely on, and they can rely on me and all of that. And so music had that, but then film had that at like a much larger scale, and it was just like, it's pretty, I'm sure everyone who works in the industry kind of feels it at some point where you're just like, oh, that's really addictive. Basically, I'm an addict.
Right. A lot of people talk about, their film family or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of, the start of your addiction, if we want to continue with the metaphor. I'm curious, as you transitioned out of film school, what was it like starting out? What were some of your first paid gigs? Were they in writing or maybe script editing or script coordination?
I think, it was sort of interesting coming out of film school. I went to a film school where we were really taught to do, and it's something I've spoken about quite a lot actually, is at this particular film school, we didn't learn heaps of theory, but we, apart from just watching films and stuff like that, but it wasn't a really formal, but it was very, very practical. And we made like 50 or 60 short films a year kind of thing. Like everyone was making all the time. So when I came out of film school, I really wanted to take that with me because I loved that. I had a lot of friends who went to universities where they were, or colleges or whatever, where they kind of were just sort of in a classroom a lot and they didn't get to make many films. And so when I came out of film school, I had a group of people that I worked with, collaborators, a gang, yet again, created, that we kind of loved working with each other. We came out, we decided to put together a very ambitious web series we got funded in Australia. We had a lot of government funding for projects. And so we got funded through a sort of emerging film fund. And it, certainly didn't give us any money in terms of a wage or anything like that, but it allowed us to make this web series that was a sort of space mystery, kind of detective mystery that was set on a space station. So it was super ambitious in terms of like art department. We really had to build this massive set that it was 45 minutes long. It was, it was 2 week shoot. And we did that. I think it was probably our first or second year out of film school. And I'd been making shorts as well, just on my own. And with these collaborators and stuff. So we kind of were making a lot of stuff during that time. And that was really important. I mean, I still had to have the day job. I couldn't get out of that stuff. So I was working a little day job as a court transcriptionist, which is kind of like a weird job to do, but quite good for stories as a writer, I have to say. And I was doing that. And then probably the first proper film industry job I got was working on the second season of Wolf Creek, where really it's one of those stories of just like an accidental connection of like put in a pilot script that I'd written, a sample script that I'd written to a Writers Guild competition, and then somebody had sent that script on to someone else. And in the end, I got a phone call from a producer who'd been recommended me because of this script, and she was looking, Lisa Scott, she was looking for a script coordinator, and I had no idea what that was, but I went in for this interview for a script coordinator for Wolf Creek for the second season, and I got the job got the job there and then. She put some trust in me and just kind of went, I think, yeah, like you can do this. And so I had to quickly Google what the hell a script coordinator is or does. And I kind of, day one was absolutely terrified, and then kind of got used to it and figured it out and made up the job as I went along. And that sort of sent me on this trajectory of working in TV.
That's interesting. Yeah. So you didn't know that was the path necessarily, but you ended up with several credits as a chord, as you guys shorten it often there. So is that something that just helped you kind of keep the flexing the muscle as you were writing, and you were still always in the background thinking like, I still want to write and direct my own stuff? Or how did the trajectory go from the script coordinator positions to finally getting this feature script off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think working in the TV machine is a really good thing. That was a very informative thing for me to do at that stage. It was, I'd worked on small sets, independent sets. I'd worked on little things, but kind of, now I'm stepping up to a, 100, 200 person crew. Now I'm working with real cast. I'm working with directors who are very, very experienced and producers who are extremely experienced, and kind of just seeing the machine of how a real show gets put together and how the production works, basically. And I call it a machine, and it's not in a cynical way, but it's a, it has to be a machine, and everyone kind of takes on a little cog of that machine, and it's really important for that wheel to keep on going. And I think it was super important for me. And I was writing on the side. I was writing for Wolf Creek as well. Like we every TV show that you work on, usually there's a problem with scripts in one way or another, or there's development. You're still developing while you're shooting or while you're in pre-production. So I was kind of doing a lot of little bits of writing on that show, and kind of ended up script editing the show more than just script coordinating, and taking on a much larger role, which was, a massive step up for like my first kind of industry job. And it led to lots of other work. I think Wolf Creek was 2017. So the last, oh my gosh, that's so many years now, last 6 or 7 years have been, working as a script editor on big TV shows for, big networks and whatnot, and writing on the side. And it's actually how I met Matt Vesely, who's the director of Monolith, and Bettina Hamilton, who's the producer. I really met them through working on TV shows that we were all three of us working on in different capacities. And so it gave me the kind of connections to people who, they hadn't made their first feature yet. And part of this development, part of Monolith was developed through a first feature initiative through our government funding system. So I teamed up with them, and that was all through just working on TV together and meeting each other and trusting each other, and kind of going, I think we're ready to go for this. And it was a really important stepping stone. I mean, I still work in TV, I still script edit, and I love the kind of fun of getting into the nitty gritty and the trying to figure things out and solve problems and all of that. It's really fast paced, and you've got a lot of adrenaline running, and I think that can be really, really exciting. So it was a super important step for me.
I do want to talk a little bit about just the nature of working in the industry in Australia. I'm sure it comes with some unique challenges and some pros and some cons, of course. But it sounds like, grants really helping you out with your first feature, probably lean more in the positive. But could you talk a little bit about what the Australian film community is like, and kind of how that helped you kind of take those next steps?
Yeah, I mean, it's really different, I guess, to the US, or my experience of the US. We do get government funding, and that's from right from when you first come out of film school, right through to, when very, very seasoned, every show, pretty much every TV show or every film will have some form of government funding. It will also be privately financed through other means as well, but government funding, and we have what we call a producer's offset, where you get a portion of the budget back. So you can actually plump up your budget using this sort of tax offset, which is, incredible. It means that we can make things that we couldn't otherwise make, and it's really supportive. And it's a little bit different in the sense that it also means that government funding has different boxes that they want to tick. So they're not necessarily so much interested in like a commercial sensibility. They're not necessarily there to try and make lots of money at the box office, but what they are there to try and do is to try and elevate maybe diverse voices or people that aren't otherwise going to be able to find traditional pathways. So we have a lot of diversity schemes through government funding, and whether it's like cultural diversity or gender or disability, or there's a lot of different, and in terms of like storytelling as well, they're looking for certain cultural stories to be told, looking for Australian stories usually first and foremost. They're looking for maybe interesting diverse stories as well as diverse practitioners and stuff like that. So it sort of changes the way you approach projects. And, for better or for worse, I think 99.9% of the time it's amazing and really incredible. And certainly I would never have had the opportunity to make Monolith in the way that we did without a diversity scheme. But at the same time, it obviously means that there's slightly different parameters in terms of like commercial value of films. And so a lot of Australian films can be, maybe not as commercially viable as what you would get in the US. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a good scheme for me. And in terms of like community, like we have a great community. It's small. It's a small market. We have a great collection of people that work in Adelaide, which is where I come from and I'm based in. And Adelaide's probably like 1.5 million people or something. So it's quite small, but we've got really strong crews here. Most of our crews work all the time because we've got a lot of, it doesn't take many productions to give us, to kind of fully crew the state or the city. So we're working all the time. So we're getting really, really good. We're quite supportive. There's some really, really talented people here. And it's a great place to live as well. Just on a little side note, it's like in terms of, living costs and stuff like that, you can have a really good work-life balance, which I think is really important. And then, of course, there's Melbourne and Sydney, which is sort of our big kind of centres. They've got much larger populations, and that's where most of the film and TV business really is, and where most of the development happens. And everyone, again, it's really small. I kind of keep on getting amazed at, like, I was sort of like, oh, Australia's so small, but then you kind of go to the US and you go to Hollywood and you're like, oh, Hollywood's really small. Like, film business is a small business. I think, it's quite insular. It's quite, not in a bad way, but it's quite small and insular, and you can be quite connected to people quite quickly. And Australia sort of has that vibe as well. Like it's people are pretty supportive of each other, and there's always going to be a little bit of a sometimes it feels like the industry is a bit eastern state centric, by which I mean it's very Melbourne and Sydney centric, and so it can be quite hard to break in if you're from outside of there, and that's probably the hardest thing for me personally, and for most people from outside of those two cities to kind of break into that industry. But it's a good community for sure.
Well, you mentioned jumping over here to LA for a spell, and because we're talking about grants, you were also the inaugural recipient of the Bird in Hand Nest residency, which sent you here, if I'm not mistaken, for 8 weeks, right? Yeah.
I came over that was in just before COVID. It was really lucky actually. We kind of just snuck in, and it was great little 8 weeks with Australians in film who are sort of our I don't know what you would call them, like our kind of like ambassadors over in America, over in LA, and they have an office in a studio over there. And I went over there for 8 weeks with my collaborator, a really good DP named Claire Bishop, and she and I went over there and just kind of worked up projects. We shot a short film while we were over there, and just kind of worked on projects and met people. And it was really good. I'd been to the US, I'd been to LA before, but for short stints, and it was just really nice to be there for a good period of time. I think I ended up being there for about 3 months, which is, it was just a good time.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Moment we've been waiting for. Let's transition to Monolith more officially. So want to start just by asking about, from a creative perspective, kind of like the germ of the story. Is it something you had been thinking about for a while? And how did that evolve as you started writing?
Yeah, I mean, so the story kind of came, I guess the beginnings of the project were through this film lab, which is a development scheme aimed at nurturing new emerging filmmakers to make their first feature. So I got together with Matt and Bettina, the director and producer of Monolith, and we kind of applied for Film Lab. And the point of Film Lab was really that you go in without a specific idea. I mean, you're going in with an idea, but without a really fully fleshed out idea. So we went in with, I think, 3 ideas. One of them became Monolith, and I think the Monolith idea was it was paragraph basically, and it was really, really basic. It was like it was a podcaster. We were pitching the idea that we wanted to do a one-woman, like one person, one location film, because it was a very low budget development lab. We knew that we only had 400,000 Australian dollars to make a film, 450,000, I can't remember. And so it was a really micro budget, you know, but the point was you've got to try and pitch a film that can be made within that budget. So that was where the film came from. We were actually kind of thinking about how do we make something that's going to fit a budget, as opposed to, I've got this great story, now what's the budget going to be? And how can I kind of squish down the story to like fit the budget? So we went in with this one paragraph, and we were chosen as one of the 3 teams that would do a year-long development of our idea. So these 3 teams would work separately, developing, and then at the end of that year, we'd have a script. Each team would have a script, and then they'd choose who got the money. So it was quite competitive, as you could imagine. It was a little bit like Hunger Games for a year, and we were like, we came in, we had a week of development, or 2 weeks of development with a script mentor, Louise Goff, who was just incredible. And really that week, the first week, was just me, Matt and Bettina sitting there and just figuring out each other creatively. We'd never worked with each other in a creative sense in this way. And so it was just us kind of really spitballing off this idea, which, you know, of a podcaster, a one woman, one location. I went away and kind of found a story one night. I like literally just kind of sat down and I thought, what, it's a great idea to have one woman, one location. It's a great idea to have a podcast. It's great. We had this concept that it was going to be interviews about some sort of, you know, interviewing people who had had some sort of alien experience. And we knew we wanted it to be a sci-fi, but that was it. That was kind of all we had. So I went away and just wrote up a more tangible kind of fleshed out story, 2-pager, came back the next day and showed it to everyone. And it was pretty much quite close to what we ended up having. So all of the bones of the story that I ended up scripting out were there. So it was a really collaborative idea. It wasn't like I'd been sitting there thinking about this concept for a really long time and pitched it to everyone. It was really based out of our kind of back and forth conversations and our collaboration that I kind of came up with it. And then it just kept on, you know, as we developed, as I wrote the script, it was always a conversation between the 3 of us, which was really nice. It's sort of a different way of working to what probably a lot of writers do. And often you don't have a director there right from the beginning of the inception and stuff like that. So it was a little bit different, but for this team and for this idea, it really, really worked. And yeah, so I spent, you know, I did 3 drafts or something in that first year, and then we got the money, and then it was like, well, we're off to the races, basically, which was great.
I'm just jealous that you guys had a year to develop a thing. I wish you all had that kind of time. That sounds amazing. I hope that other folks who didn't win the contest, they have full rights to go still make that movie. They just obviously don't get the funding the way you do.
I'm
just jealous of that whole system. I wish we had something comparable. I know,
we're so lucky. And they're actually doing it every year here. So there's been another project that's gone up and running from that got greenlit last year, and they've just started shortlisting people for this year's project as well. So it's an ongoing development scheme, which is great. It just means that we can get people from Adelaide starting to really, you know, take that leap into writing and directing features and producing features, which is just, it's really hard to get that leap, I think. And I don't know if I would have been able to get there very easily or quickly without something like Film Lab, I can only say that, we've been very lucky.
Yeah, no, we do. We have certain labs here like that. I just sounds like you guys have it a little more plugged in than some of the scattered stuff we do here in the States. I don't think they give them full years to have a team like that develop. But either way, congratulations on winning that. But you did mention the single location, the single performer element of the story being designed because of the low budget. Did the experience of COVID and quarantining also kind of influence how any of you approached the story, or was that just kind of happenstance that you were more forced?
Yeah, it's sort of weird. It's like a lot of people have really responded to it as a sort of COVID film, and it wasn't. I don't think we ever really spoke about it being COVID specific. Probably, I think like everyone that lived through COVID, like all of us, it all became slightly ingrained in us, this idea of isolation, and I think probably that was playing on all of our minds a little bit, but it was certainly just a production choice, and kind of like the aim of the development lab was to be bold and to just go for it. And so that was part of it as well, was just like almost like a challenge. Like, can we tell this sort of alien invasion story sort of a la, one of our favorite films, it's like Arrival. Can we tell that story, but in a really small, pared down kind of way? And, and it was more almost like a sort of formal challenge rather than a kind of emotional one. But I think I think COVID affects all of us and probably burnt itself into our subconscious. So I think there's an element of it, and it certainly made it a lot easier to shoot in terms of it was very pared back and we didn't have to worry so much about, because we shot it in 2021. So it was sort of, COVID was definitely still a consideration and was a problem for a lot of productions. So yeah, it made it a lot easier in that sense, but it was never designed as a COVID film.
It'll just always be kind of accidentally linked to it just because, like you said, the nature of it being isolation. Yeah, that was kind of a leading into one of my next questions is not only what maybe sparked the idea for you beyond just the development process, but you mentioned Arrival. I've said on this show a few times that was the first movie that I ever didn't just well up like you do at a sports movie, but like I sobbed at that movie. It was fresh off of a election going not the way we wanted here in the States, and I was a brand new father, and the whole kid aspect of that movie made me just like leak.
Yeah, it's an emotional journey, that one, isn't it? Oh my God.
But so to that point, though, again, there's such specific stuff in here, and I was going to ask you, what kind of research did you do as far as the podcasting aspect, as far as going into things about monoliths, about conspiracy theories, about alien invasions? Was it all on you to just kind of research the heck out of this, or did Matt and others kind of pitch in with any certain points of the story?
Yeah, we certainly, I think we certainly, Bettina organized a conversation. I think it was Bettina organized a conversation with a podcaster, Georgina Savage, who did this great podcast, and I wish I could remember the name of it right now, but it's really, really good. We interviewed her and just spoke to her about like her kind of process, and her podcast is actually about her own family. So there's actually some parallels, which we didn't quite realize when we were going into it, and sort of when we listened to the podcast and everything, it was like, oh my gosh, this is like a lot of parallels to the story. She has a moment where she realizes, you know, the deeds of her family in her own podcast. And so we spoke to her about just boring stuff like equipment and then we spoke to her about process and just, you know, getting a bit of a feel of podcasts. So we did do a bit of research in that, obviously listening to podcasts and thinking about podcasts. But really I think in a sense, the film is not, in my mind, it's not really about podcasts. It's about journalism and about, well, it's not, I mean, it's partially about journalism. It's also about guilt and privilege and all sorts of other things, but just the process of telling a story, you know, and who gets to tell the story. And I think we were at a stage we were talking a lot about, you know, Trump was in, I think at the time, or he'd just come out of office, and we were sort of talking a lot about, you know, truth and what is truth and, you know, fake news and conspiracies. And that just felt like it was really in the air. It was like kind of, you know, and now with AI and with, you know, with people, with elections being rigged by bloody artificial intelligence, you know, there's a real sense that you can't trust anything anymore, and you just can't trust you can't even trust somebody's voice to be their voice, you know, and that was really interesting to me. And so, you know, I did go down Reddit rabbit holes for sure, did a lot of Redditing, you know, creepypasta and all of that sort of stuff, just to kind of look at what people were thinking about, what they were talking about, just get a bit of inspiration for their idea, that, you know, what was happening in the air. Because we were just kind of, I guess for the first couple of weeks of writing it, I was just sort of sitting there like listening, just like grabbing ideas out of the air and just seeing what might fit. And and the actual monoliths, I mean, the original pitch was a little bit inspired by, you know, those monoliths that people put around the world that were like Stanley Kubrick's monoliths. The silver
I remember that,
from 2001. Yeah, and everyone was like, oh, I don't know if this is an art hoax or is this, you know, and some people were like, I think it's real. I think the invasion has begun or whatever. And I think just that confusion, you know, and so that's where we got the title from. And the title kind of stuck. And I think it served as we went along, it served a different purpose of kind of talking about the monolith kind of structure of society and the sort of, you know, is truth a monolith kind of thing? And, you know, no, it's not is the answer. And I think that was, but that was certainly something we were kind of interested in, all those conspiracy theories. And so, you know, so it just felt like, and still feels like, we're at a time when conspiracy is the name of the game. That's what, I mean, I've known so many people who have gone down those conspiracy rabbit holes, you know, people who I would never have expected to go down them. And it feels really quite scary but also quite fascinating for me anyway, is sort of like how did people go down those rabbit holes and what really is the truth and what's not the truth. And yeah, all that stuff was really fascinating for me. So that was kind of, I didn't do any massive research, but I certainly, you know, was listening to the vibes of the world, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And I think genre is such a great place to explore are,
Yeah.
as you say, the reflection of kind of our current fears and the scary things happening around us. And you led right into my next question was going to be about like the theme around the ethics of journalism, because that is something I saw as very core to the film, at least as I interpreted it. And I also kind of saw it as an exploration of responsibility for anybody that's putting out stories into the world. And, you know, as people, we're all in a creative industry, all of us. And it's something I often wonder, like, what level of responsibility do creatives have, you know, for the human impact of their work?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think about that all the time. The impact, you know, you can have impact that's just extremely far reaching that you never really considered, you know, and there is a responsibility. I think we all have a responsibility to intelligently consider and question whether, you know, there's a line in the film which there was a lot of debate about where the older female journalist who the protagonist talks to says, you know, we don't have to say everything. You know, we have a duty to protect the public. And Matt and I debated that line for a long time, and we kind of, you know, went back and forth on whether that line should be in the film, because obviously, you know, there's also this idea of journalism, you know, the freedom of speech, and that journalism needs to, if something needs to be said, then something needs to be said, and we can't hide things because we believe we need to protect public interests or anything like that. But there's also an element of, you know, we all know that media has such an incredible influence on people, you know, and we've seen that in the last, particularly in my mind, the last 3, 4, 5 years, and especially with politics the way it is, and you know, the state of the world the way it is, and the fact that, you know, journalism, I think, always has a point of view. And, you know, I might be wrong about that, but I feel like if there's a person behind a story, there's a point of view somewhere. And, you know, documentary films, I was talking to someone the other day about who wants to make a documentary, and I was sort of saying, well, I think, you know, every documentary film has a perspective, and, you know, nothing is just absolutely unbiased, unvarnished truth, because you're crafting a story. You're deciding what's in the film and what's not in the film, and that's as important as anything, really. Like you're crafting something. That's just the point of it. So that was something that I think, I really loved about kind of investigating a little bit in Monolith. And, you know, I think probably if I had my time again, we'd probably go a little bit deeper into it even. I think there's something probably a bit more pointed that we could be saying. We might have been hedging our bets a little bit if I'm going to be critical about my own film. But the idea of truth in journalism, I mean, it's a hot topic, right? It's you know, you start talking to people and everyone's got an opinion.
Oh, indeed. And I think you handled it well with like nuance. And I think not everything needs to be pointed. So I'll give you props since you gave yourself a criticism there.
Thank you.
Speaking of kind of different perspectives, I want to talk a little bit about the ending. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's definitely elements of it that are up for interpretation to the viewer. And I'm curious if it's something you felt like you and everyone else had a perspective on, that this is the truth of the ending, or do you feel like amongst yourself, maybe Bettina and Matt and all of that, you all have different interpretations of that ending?
Yeah, we all have different interpretations. And I like to say, because we get asked that question often, you know, like every Q&A we do, someone's like, how does it end? How does it really end? And I kind of like to say that, like, Matt's always like, oh, I think it's this way. And, you know, we've actually kind of made a pact at this point where we're not telling anyone what any of us think, because it's not really about our perspective. It's actually way more interesting, and always is more interesting when you ask, well, what do you think? And then people will tell you what they think, and then they'll actually reveal quite a lot about themselves, about like their perspective on the world, really, because, you know, some people are much more romantic and optimistic and all of that. But yeah, I always like to say that I'm the only one that really knows because I wrote it. So that's my like fallback. But yeah, we all have very different perspectives. And Lily, the actor, she also has another point of view. So yeah, we kind of keep that one close to the chest. I think it's, you know, I think in the end the question is always like, does it really matter how it ends? You know, and for those who have seen Monolith, it's kind of like, that's the question, is does it really matter which one? Yeah.
Right. Asking a different question. Speaking of Lily, did you was it a conscious choice from the jump to just make that lead character not be named, as they're only referred to as the interviewer in the film?
Yeah, it was really conscious. We had a lot of conscious choices in the film, kind of quite, I guess, what you would call like quite formal approaches to the film. And that was one of them. And man, that was hard. Like, as a writer, there were a couple of things that were really, really hard about the film. Obviously, just having one character on screen is quite hard to write and to find kind of the way in, and to, and there's even just some logistical kind of questions that, and problems that you have to solve with that. But yeah, and then not naming her character was also really hard because, the first thing you do when you call up someone, especially you cold call someone as a journalist, is probably tell them your name, hopefully, because it would be a bit weird if you don't. And so trying to make that feel natural, like no one really notices that she never actually has a name. But it was important for us for her to feel kind of slightly detached, like we didn't quite know her, didn't quite have a name, weren't quite intimate with her, and were sort of slightly distanced from that character. And in a way, she's just a stand-in for a journalist and could be kind of anyone in some ways. And I guess that was kind of the perspective that we took on it. But yeah, it was conscious, but man, it was hard. Like, cannot tell you the amount of times that I was like, man, I just want to call her like Kate or something. I just need to give her a name. I think Lily gave herself a name. She, as an actor, she felt that she needed to have a name. So she gave herself a name in prep in the pre-period.
No, that works. It was something I think Becky and I both had noticed too, hence the question being among these. But little bit about you is that half the Paper Street team actually did meet you in the flesh. You'd mentioned some of the festivals that this played, including South by. I know they bunked with you, I believe, at Overlook in New Orleans. But this being your first feature, this being you attending some of the Q&As and the screenings of this film, how has that experience been? How is it having an audience react to your work, especially one you made during, the COVID, and you might not have been able to immediately see like audience reactions at the time, but how's that whole thing been as far as just doing stateside festivals?
It's been incredible, so when we first made the film, we even in our very, 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 very first pitch, when it was just like a paragraph long, we said what our dream is to play at South by Southwest, and so then to be able to fulfill that dream and to go out and to premiere it at South by to a midnighter audience was kind of, it was super nerve-wracking because it was technically not our first premiere. We'd actually played it at Adelaide Film Festival, which was a co-financier of the film. So that was part of our deal, was to play it with them. So we played to Adelaide Film Festival before to, obviously all of our kind of peers and family and friends. And that was a great experience. And that was the first public screening of it. But then to play at South by to people that did not know us from a bar of soap, they're just like totally strangers to us. We were really nervous and went out to dinner with our sales agents, and we were kind of like, you could feel the nerves, we're like, we turned up at the Alamo at South by where the midnight section screens, and we just didn't know whether anyone was going to be there, because you don't sell tickets in advance at South by. It's like just on a pass basis, and we were just like, oh my God, what if no one's there? And it was a full screening. It had a really good vibe. We sat in and we watched it with everyone, and it's always interesting watching different audiences experience the film, because there's always some audiences are just so involved, which the South by one was, and so was our Adelaide one, and they often are, but it's quite a quiet film, so people like, the audience is really, really quiet. They're just like kind of just watching, whereas a lot of midnight films you go and see and it's gore and it's like really extreme, and so the audience is kind of screaming and laughing and super vocally engaged, whereas Monolith is just like you can hear a pin drop. And it was just a really good experience. Just everyone afterwards kind of felt really positive, and it felt like that was, and then we kind of had all of our sessions at South by were sold out, and it felt like there was really good buzz around it, and we were, as creatives, able to go out and meet lots of people. Matt and I both got US management from it, and sort of started working on, projects with other people, with US people. And, I think from a career perspective, doing South by and doing the US festival run, playing, we played at Sitges in Spain, which is a big genre festival, and that was amazing as well. Went over there for that. Just, it's been a dream run, like getting to go around the world with your film and having such an enthusiastic response from people has been, kind of like, honestly, a bit of a dream come true for me. And meeting all of this amazing community of people, this amazing horror community and genre community of filmmakers who across the world are just so supportive of each other. And we're all quite different, like we all have different sensibilities. Monolith is a very, very, very different film from, we premiered at South by on the Monday, and then on Wednesday, Lily, who's in Monolith, was also in one of the leads in Evil Dead Rise. And so we were playing that, they were playing that film for 2,000 people at this enormous premiere South by, which was huge, and everyone was screaming and, you know, so engaged, and people were such big fans of that film. It's such a different kind of film. Like, that is a really different film, but kind of finding this community crossover is really exciting. Like, we can all make very different films, but we're all very supportive of each other. And, you know, you find when you're doing film festival, you're sort of, it's like the alumni, it's like the class of 2023, I guess, and you're just going from festival to festival. And so, you know, like, I met Paper Street through Artifice Girl, Franklin Richards' film, which is incredible. And you know, we're just they went to Biffan. I think Matt Vesely and Franklin were at Biffan together, and, you know, I went to Overlook with Ashley Sneed, who was the producer on that, and that was incredible. And, like, I stayed at you guys' house, your, like, Paper Street Overlook house, and so, you know, people were willing to kind of give up their bed space for me, which was really great, you know. And it's sort of just, yeah, I think it's a great community of people that are just incredibly supportive. I've loved every minute of it. And to be honest, I didn't actually know about this community before making Monolith, before going into these film festivals, because I hadn't really been part of any specific genre community before. So it was, yeah, super exciting.
That's awesome. That feels like a perfect place to wrap up the formal portion of the interview on a incredibly positive note about your dreams coming true, meeting all these amazing people in the community. And now we can transition to equally fun stuff, the Rapid Fire 15.
God, I'm a bit nervous about this.
Don't worry, don't be nervous about it. Everyone always gets intimidated, I think, because it says rapid, but it's really
rapid,
not.
I feel like I'm at school. It's like a school thing when I was like, they're like rapid maths, and you're like, oh my God, I can't do it. 2 times 7.
Nah, it's not like that. We won't ask you any math, I promise.
Right. Oh my God.
No, this is more just like, what's some stuff you like? And it's first thing that comes to mind. It's nobody's going to judge you.
Yeah.
This is not a cool test. There's no points. There's no system. It's just tell us some stuff you like. So we kind of tailor it towards some stuff you've told us about you, and change some questions on the fly. So we'll see how we do here. And it's just all like, how'd you feel about Crocodile Dundee? How'd you feel about Crocodile Dundee too? No, stupid things Yanks would ask.
I love it.
No, I'm kidding. All right.
Boo, Sean, that was a bad joke. Gosh.
No, I'm saying I'm feeding into, you know, bad stereotypes about Yanks.
The stereotype. Look, I'm all for it. I'm all for an Australian stereotype.
Hey, we're the first to knock ourselves. Testament to your film. Like you said, you were able to keep a midnight crowd engaged and quiet, and we have a bad reputation. It's only getting worse about the way people behave in movie theaters here in the States.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. So question 1 in this rapid fire. What movie do you think you've seen the most in your life?
Kindergarten Cop. Easily.
You already told us earlier. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, it's got to be Kindergarten, or maybe Mary Poppins, but I think Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah.
Question 2, who is your daddy and what does he do? No, kidding. Sorry, go ahead, Becky.
One of the most quotable movies, I will say, is definitely Kindergarten Cop. All right, for reals though, question 2. Is there a movie, a show, or a song that always makes you cry?
Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah. No. Probably, look, I am a sucker for Titanic. I know everyone. It just immediately waterworks. I cannot. It's too much for me every time. Titanic is such a weeper.
Oh, for sure.
No shame in that. Do you have a film in your mind that was the first one as a kid that maybe really scared you, stuck with you, just gave you nightmares?
Can I say Kindergarten Cop again? I'm kind of saying like a broken record, but I honestly, there are moments in that film that absolutely terrified me as a child, but I kept on watching it. It was like I was glued to the screen, but I was so scared of the antagonist in that film and his mother. But yeah, Kindergarten Cop.
Her hair was really scary.
It was so scary. So scary. Oh my gosh. That scene when they're going in through the high school.
Yeah.
Chasing, you know, oh my God. And the water's going from the fire thing. Like that's a big one for me. Yeah.
It's intense. It's very, definitely taps into some childhood fears for sure.
I think so. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of fears, question 4. Is there a particular horror movie trope or subgenre that you really don't like and or something that always gets under your skin?
I think what probably always gets a little bit under my skin is like extreme sort of torture stuff. Like honestly, even just, I don't know, someone like even not that extreme, if someone has like, hammers someone's hand, it really just like icks me real bad and just kind of freaks me out. So I'd say like kind of particularly, torture porn kind of horror is something that kind of freaks me out a lot.
No, that's fair. And I made Crocodile Dundee jokes, but this is the only hacky, like yank to Aussie question I'm going to ask you. What is your favorite film or least favorite film, if you can't stand him, by fellow Aussie Baz Luhrmann?
Oh my God, Baz Luhrmann. My favorite film of his would be Romeo and Juliet, I think. That was a big one when I was a teenager. And easily my least favorite film is Australia with Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman. That is, I don't know what he was thinking, but not a good one.
If you hate it, you should find he stretched it out to a miniseries recently, which is on Hulu here in the States, where he added scenes back in.
I was like, what is he thinking? Like, what are they thinking? What is going on? What audience is there for this? I do not understand. I don't know. That's a weird cash cow to flog. That's a weird one.
It's a weird soft spot for my wife. She watched the extended version, and I guess they put back in the original ending where he does die, because in the theatrical version, they weirdly cut that he's still alive somehow. And I may have that completely backwards, but either way.
Oh my God. Yeah. Crazy.
Question 6. Who is your all-time favorite filmmaker?
All-time favorite filmmaker? Ooh, I think probably it's a tie for me between Coen Brothers and kind of weirdly probably Christopher Nolan. Somewhere between. I'm a bit of a Christopher Nolan fangirl, which is kind of weird, but I just every time I just want to watch his films. I love them.
I have no debate with that. I think the internet overhates that man.
Yeah, I don't understand.
It's really weird.
I just think I don't know. I'm kind of into that. Yeah, I think, but the Coen Brothers were the ones that first, really switched me on to making movies, and they're what I kind of go back to all the time, and that's my jam for sure.
I very much agree. Was just talking with a friend today that their bottom 5 is better than most people's oeuvre.
I would die if I could make their bottom 5.
Yeah, exactly. Who would you say, speaking of writing, is your favorite author, novelist, not necessarily a screenwriter first, but do you have a favorite author?
Favorite
or
author?
Journalist, if not, maybe?
Yeah, I think, God, that's a hard one, actually. I don't even know if I have a favorite author. I read a lot of books, but I don't often pay a lot of attention to who wrote them. I'm not an author fan. I'm just like a book fan, So I quite like. He's very striking, and I always remember his work. Ian McEwan is, I think a very memorable author, and I've certainly read a lot of his books and all of his books, and I've always enjoyed them.
Fair enough. Question 8. What is your local favorite spot to eat in Adelaide? And where would you bring a friend, maybe, who is visiting, to give them like a good taste of Southern Australia?
Oh, good taste. I think I'd have to take them down to Chinatown. We have a really good Chinatown that's part of our sort of central markets, which is where I would take them. And I'd probably take them to a place called Ying Chow, which is kind of like a divey, like university kind of Chinese place that just makes the best food and has been an institution for 50 years or something in Adelaide. And I think Ying Chow is my go-to and it's open till like midnight or whatever. And yeah, it's my go-to for everything. So I would take someone there if they were okay with fluorescent lighting and sort of plastic chairs.
For good food.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Question 9. This is always a very telling one. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Oh, first celebrity crush. My first celebrity crush would have been, I don't know, maybe like Orlando Bloom in Lord of the Rings. I think I was about 12 or something when Lord of the Rings came out, and I feel like Orlando was stickered all over my school books and all of that sort of stuff, and I had posters of Legolas and Orlando Bloom.
I had a friend in junior high that had high school, had a Legolas like full size cutout in their room.
God, I had that.
So
I had, and actually it's probably a tie between Orlando Bloom and Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. I had a full size core flute cutout of Neo in my room for many years, which is, I don't know, I feel like it's in my mum's shed now. It's quite embarrassing, but yeah, I was an obsessive for sure.
Nice.
That's a collector's item. Got to keep that one safe.
I know. Oh, but it was Matrix Revolutions, so it's probably not much of a collector's item anymore. Yeah.
All right, question 10. Do you have a favorite festival experience or theater screening? Now, not necessarily like your own, movie, but which that could be that if that's your answer, but anytime, or even just a theatrical screening to see any movie, like a time when you thought, oh, this is so fun to watch this with an excited crowd.
Yeah, I was really touched, I think, when I saw at South by, I saw Evil Dead Rise premiere there. I think it was just a lot of fun, and I haven't watched many films with really large audiences like that. And I just think, I kind of watched it and just saw people's absolute glee and joy and terror and all the things that a movie, I think, should do. And I think that screening felt really, really fun at South by Southwest. That was a really fun premiere. And probably that tied with, I went to the premiere at Adelaide Film Festival of Talk to Me, which was also with a lot of people, probably 1,000 people or so. And kind of the first time anyone in the world was watching this film and just kind of going, I think that's going to be a really good, big film, and knowing that this was made by people from Adelaide and people that I went, were at the same film school, like the Philippou boys were at the same film school as me, and I knew their background, I knew their life, and just thinking, wow, this is going to go gangbusters for them. And obviously not knowing how far it went, but it was a really fun premiere as well.
Nice. Similarly, do you have a favorite concert you've ever attended, or a very memorable standout concert experience?
When I was younger, I think I went to see the Flaming Lips, I think, when I was about 18 or something, and I was just kind of blown away. It was kind of like they're in a really good era of their career, and they just put out a good album. I can't remember which one, but they were just, it was big spectacle, and just here in Adelaide, and it was just like a really fun kind of sitting there with 1,000 people just being like all over it, and just thinking this is sort of a magical band at a magical time. That was a really nice experience. And then probably the other one would be seeing Leonard Cohen, which I'm a big fan of Leonard Cohen, and watching him at a very sort of sedate kind of winery performance, and just being like, man, and he's like 80 years old, and just thinking, this guy's really got it, and I love his music. And that was a really beautiful time.
I got another music one for you, and I hope, since you are also a musician yourself, you'll have a good answer for this one.
Yeah.
What is your go-to karaoke song?
Do you know what? I hate karaoke. I don't have a go-to. I wish Matt Vesely has a go-to. I think it's Don't Want to Miss a Thing. And so he knows the right song to go to. But I think for a lot of musicians, karaoke is kind of like quite terrifying, because people expect you to get up on stage and to like really bring it. And singing karaoke is very different to singing in a band. And so the few times I've done karaoke, I like going to watch other people, but the few times I've actually done it on stage, I think I sang Panic by the Smiths as a duet. And that was not a good song to sing. It did not get the crowd going. Let's just say that. Probably would not suggest the Smiths. Don't Want to Miss a Thing is a much better idea.
Nice. Would you do it in a private room though, like with just a few close friends?
Yes.
That's the only way I do it. In front of a whole group. Ooh.
Yeah, we've done a private. We actually did our rap party. After our rap party for Monolith, we went and did a private karaoke room that Lily got really drunk and paid for, and that was quite fun. Like, I have no memory of what we actually sang, but it was a lot more fun doing it in a little group. But we've got a famous karaoke bar in Adelaide, that La Sing, which everyone goes to after every rap party and all of that, and that is a purely public, massively public kind of karaoke, and that's just a bit much for me. But yeah, an individual room is okay.
No, fair enough. This is in a similar vein, so you don't have to sing it, but what would be Lucy Campbell's walkout music if you were coming out to hype up a crowd or to introduce a film? Maybe it's a TED Talk. Maybe you're coming out to, as like a ball player or a fighter or something. Like, what's the intro music that you would come out to that would get them all going?
Oh my God, what would get everyone all going? What's a good bloody anthem? I don't know, something by Queen or like the Rolling Stones or something or the Kinks or I when I was a kid I really loved like 60s music. That was kind of like my vibe for sure. The Who, actually, I'd probably choose the Who. Who Are You? Off of Who's Next. I think that would be a cool song to come out to. That's quite epic. Smash a bit of epic. Who?
Yeah, everybody loves the Who.
Yeah, I think so. I think it translates. It translates. So, I want to make sure that everyone in the audience can truly enjoy this. It can't be too niche. So, yeah, the Who.
Hey, penultimate question. If you could program a double feature of any two films in the world, so people could get to know you, like your two wolves, if you will, like a pair of films that you love dearly, but either go together as a double feature or maybe they don't. Up to you, however you want to frame it. What would your two films be?
Ooh. As soon as you said that, I was like, could you put Kindergarten Cop and Mary Poppins together, or would that just be a bit too crazy?
I mean, you mentioned them enough that I do feel like they do define you, those two
They
movies.
seem quite definitive.
Between those two and Fargo, they are the Lucy Campbell kind of triad
Yeah,
of
that's
influence.
the collection. If I was going to do a Criterion collection, maybe that's what I would put in. No, I think if I was going to sort of go like really influential movies, I'd probably want to put one that is influential in a really kind of cinematic sense, and maybe something like I'd probably put The Matrix, to be honest. Like I feel like that sums up a lot of my like sci-fi love and kind of action and slightly deeper, themes, thematically kind of quite interested and switched on and all of that sort of stuff. I think like the first Matrix would be on there, and maybe I'd pair that with like a Coen probably with Fargo. I don't think those two particularly go together, but I think that would be quite fun to watch the two of them. I'd be into that. I'd be there.
Perfect.
Yeah, no wrong answers there. And then finally, question 15, what would be your dream project to make? Be it, an original ideas or an IP you'd like to adapt, an existing story, a historical figure, whose story you'd like to bring to life. What's the ultimate one if you had like no budget or any kind of concerns? What's the dream project?
I think the dream project is like, that's a hard question because it sort of feels like it's always changing. I don't know if I'm like Scorsese and I've got like that dream, the project that's going to define me or whatever. But I think I've got a feature that I've written and directed that feels like it's kind of my voice and feels like it's my perspective. And that's sort of a real dream of mine, is to kind of get something out there as a director as well as a writer, and to really explore that part of myself. And then, I think I actually was just reading this morning about, how they're making a Harry Potter TV series and writers are pitching on it and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I would love to write a Harry Potter TV series like that. When I was a kid, reading Harry Potter, and regardless of JK's, her voice now, but at the time it was such an influential book for me that I think that like if I could write the Harry Potter TV series, I would be absolutely down for that. That would be good.
You did it. You made it through the rapid fire 15, and it wasn't that scary, was it?
Not too scary. No, it's not too scary. It was good. Thanks for that, guys.
Awesome. So as we wrap up here, I'm kind of curious, kind of what's next for you? What's on the horizon for Lucy Campbell?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got a feature that I'm writing, that I'm pitching as a writer director, which sort of feels like it's going moving forward, which is great. I've got the script for that. So that's something that I'm really focusing on. I've got another feature that I'm writing with the Monolith crew, with Matt and Bettina, that I'm writing for them, which is really exciting because we just love collaborating with each other. And I think it's so hard to find good collaborators that when you find them, you kind of hang on to them if you can. And other than that, just kind of got a couple of shorts that I want to direct because, I really want to just keep on making stuff. I'm really keen on just making sure that I'm still making stuff. I'm not forever kind of in this like development hell, as everyone likes to call it, but, just forever just sitting in a tiny little room kind of tapping away on a computer. I want to make sure I'm getting out there and still making stuff and, finishing it and getting it out and showing people and getting audience reactions and learning and creating is a really big part for me. So yeah, I think I'm excited about this year. I think there's a lot of good things in the works and a lot of good collaborations, and yeah, it's really promising.
Nice. And anything you'd like to plug or promote as far as if somebody wants to find you online? I don't know if it's a website or social media or anything.
I don't have a website. Actually, people keep on saying I should get a website. I was like, really? Do I need to get a website? LucyCampbell.com. But I've got Instagram, which is lucycampbell.film, I think. I'm not very good at social media, but I do have an Instagram because I think that's seems to be where everyone's going. Yeah, lucycampbell.film is generally where you can reach me. And it's always good to chat with people if people are interested in talking about and hopefully please go watch Monolith. It's available on video on demand over there in the US, and I would love to hear everyone's thoughts.
No, and we'll link the show notes at paperstreetpodcast.com. We'll have links to Lucy, to the movie as well. And yes, reiterating that, Monolith right now available to rent or buy at all the normal platforms, Vudu, Amazon, and such. Here stateside, we'll keep folks up to date as we learn if it ends up on a streaming service or anything. But yes, well worth a watch. We were all glad to have caught it. Some of us in the flesh with Lucy, some of us on VOD. But yes, Lucy, thank you so much for the time. We were glad to be able to talk to you about Monolith and a whole lot more and writing, and we're looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Always appreciate. And it's been a great chat. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all your answers from the kindergarten cop references, which probably was called out like 10 times on this podcast. Oh my God. All the way to the deeper stuff about journalism and privilege and all of that. It was really a pleasure, and congratulations on the movie.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Lucy. Thank you.
Thanks.